Hello, and welcome to Embracing the Fight. I am Erica Lamar, your digital creator and host. And if you've been with me since January of 2023, you will know that Embracing the Fight is about normalizing the conversations surrounding physical and mental health issues and concerns. Now, why is that even important? If you think about it, people go through trials, they go through tribulations, but most of the time they do it in silence. Why do they do it in silence? Because they fear that people will judge them or share intimate details about their life if they tell someone that they trust. And trust can be broken in many ways. So why not create a space for them to be able to talk about these things? And you remember growing up, you probably had, a couple of cousins, uncles, aunts, people in your family that they just say, oh, so and so is just not right in the head. They got this going on or that going on. When all the while they could have been suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. Now, how do you think that made that person feel? They probably feel ostracized. What we're doing here at Embracing the Fight is breaking that cycle. We want to give you the opportunity to talk about the things that you're dealing with. We'd love for you to share your testimonies because when you share your testimony, there's a possibility that you can help another person heal. Now, how do you become a guest on Embracing the Fight? Just reach out to me at operations@diversitydesign.com, or you can reach me on all social media platforms at Embracing the Fight. The only difference is on Instagram, it's Embracing the Fight _ Now that I've gotten the business out of the way, you will see that I have a very handsome guest on the screen. And in a moment, I'm going to allow him the opportunity to introduce himself. And then after he introduces himself, he's going to tell you why we named this episode 125, Safe Space. All right. So who are you?
Well, good afternoon. I'm Mr. Leviticus Robinson, young man that hails from Mobile, Alabama. Um, Not a lot to it, but for me, safe space comes from just watching so much in the last 42, 43 years, especially dealing with young men that don't have a safe space. They don't have a group that they can just talk to about everyday life instead of guessing on a decision or guessing on a choice or just guessing on everyday life, like you alluded to a few minutes ago. Just being able to trust somebody with a conversation and they can literally keep that within themselves without sharing or gossiping. Because a lot of times some men gossip more than females. And unfortunately, it's hard for a young man to trust another young man when he watches how they carry themselves. So long story short, for me, creating safe space is a platform to allow a young man to not be just openly be himself, where he can talk openly about his vulnerability, his failures, successes, what he's thinking about doing. A place to just ask why, a place to ask who, and definitely a place to ask without fear, because a lot of times young men and older men are being shunned. That young man turns into an older man that still cannot properly ask the who or the why. So
All right. I'm just, a little sad here that you said females gossip. I mean, all people gossip.
said dudes
But we won't go there
got
first. First.
let me provide clarity for that one. I said that some guys gossip more than females. I'm not comparing the two because I don't want this to be a male versus female thing. We all need each other. I just noticed this is why safe space, because my circle's this small. However, two young men that we talk to besides my oldest brother, we've noticed that a lot of times the conversations that are being gossiped sometimes are the males, not the females. So
Mhm.
that's why when you ask a male to open up, it's hard because he's watching other young men that are gossiping more than a female. That's all I stated.
I was just harassing you just that much.
That's all good. And that's why I gave you that answer.
All right. So everybody knows anyone who comes on Embracing the Fight, they know that my guests have met me or come in contact with me in some way. So, Leviticus, how do we know each other?
It was a long summer day back in 1952. I'm joking.
Don't be like that.
Um, Nope. It was actually my cousin that introduced us. So there are four. It just went from there, mutual conversation, mutual friends. Just started hanging out and having conversations and just going from there.
This all happened in Mobile at Burger King. What was that Burger King? Was it Old Shell? Road was that? Whatever. It was Burger King because I had a love for Whoppers back then. We don't eat there now. But anyway, let's jump into this episode because what I really want to understand is what caused your heart to want to create this safe space.
Honestly, because I am and I was one of those young men, but luckily I've been blessed to receive mentors, guidance, and men around me that allowed me to ask those questions without judging me. But also, as I observed them, I knew that I could trust them because I seen how they went about life. I seen how they moved, and a lot of the stuff that I shared with them didn't go outside of that circle. They didn't like down on me. But what I loved about um, and what brought this to fruition for me was what I loved about them was they also shared their stories with me. They didn't try to fake it. It's like, hey, bro, I've been there. I know what you're talking about. I know why you're asking. So for me, but also just fast forward to these past couple of years, I'm watching certain people say these young men are going to hell in a handbasket. No, they're out here, they're asking for guidance, they're asking for help, but it's like people are shunning them or they giving them fake answers. They giving them stuff that they don't even do. And it's like, bro, please stop lying to me.
Mhm.
So you can't tell a young man to put that gun down when you don't have no place for him to go or you don't have no resource to give him. A lot of times, don't even tell him what a mentor is. So for me, it's not weak to show him like, yo, this is what a mentor look like. This is how a mentor cares himself. But I also learned by observing myself is this. Sometimes we talk too much to the young man. We got to meet them where they're at, just like people met us where we were. So,
Okay. And you are currently serving as a mentor now, correct?
oh yeah.
All right. And as you're serving as a mentor, why do they normally feel like it's easier to talk to you rather than a male family member? Because I know they probably come in and say, I got a brother, I got a cousin, I got a dad, a granddad, but they bypass family to talk to you. Has anyone ever said why it's important to them to be able to speak freely to someone who doesn't know them?
Because they're not going to be judged, for one. But two, also, it's just like when people want to do better, it's not knocking anybody's family member. But sometimes when they're watching their brother do the same old every day and they just want better for their life, that's one. But two, also, like I said, not being judged, they can just have that open conversation again. Just by some young men are, well, a lot of young men are smart. Sometimes they observe you to see how you actually carry yourself and how you go about life, or is what you're saying is true. So that allows them to open up to you more than anything. And what I've learned is a young man would always open up when there's food involved.
Okay. And do they come into your environment or do you go into theirs?
It's a mixture. I work out, I hoop. One of my biggest places, one of the biggest places that I do meet him is playing basketball, or just really, you name it. Those two, but I notice those two are the areas a lot of times.
Okay, so while you're playing basketball, just a typical day, and there's a lot of young men that's on the court. How do you mentor to them, or how do you show yourself available for them to come and talk to you? Or is it just by chance that they say, oh, this man's out here hooping with us, let me talk to him? How does it work?
It's a mixture of all three. I think sometimes we try to look for the perfect moment, but one that I left out is also the church.
Mhm.
Um, Having what they call a small group or men's mentor section or men's fellowship, something to that extent. I would strongly advise if you have a son or older young man, if he's near church, whatever the case may be,
Mhm.
find that small group that deals with young men, older men, and they're just talking about life. Because in that now, when you do have that conversation in the gym, it's not trying to find the perfect moment. It's literally after a game or after you're about to walk out the gym. A lot of times people are like, hey, where I go get a haircut at? Hey, where I go do this at? And that's when you start that conversation from. Or you just see some of the craziest stuff are about to happen in the gym. Be like, man, let me holler at you. Just do it this way. And then they respect you for it, or vice versa. You just go from there.
All right. And without giving, any names, Can you give us an instance of where you mentored someone, you saw a change in their life that that changed the trajectory of them going to the street? It caused them to want to do more with their life. Say they went to school or they did, start a business or they did something different. Can you give me an example?
Actually, it was a wake up call for me too. I was living in New Jersey, and without mentioning the young man's name, his mom approached me about his brother's lifestyle.
Mhm.
And I was just talking to him. We were sitting outside the church, and as we just began to talk, I would just take him to the gym, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
And then one day he literally came and told me like, "Hey, bro, I don't feel like going with my bro." I said, "Why not?" And that's when he told me, he's like, "Hey, my brother's grabbing me to go fight when we go home," and I'm like, "Come again?" So basically, they were in the game. And his brother's like, yo, I can't live that life no more. So as I just kept taking him to the gym, et cetera. So it was nothing about me because people have done it for me.
Mhm.
But long story short, as I kept taking him to the gym, he was asking about what I do. But I didn't get into all that. I just like, hey, yo, I work out, I hoop. And then later on, I did tell him what I did. And it ended up changing him for the better because he noticed my habits. He noticed my tendencies didn't change. I was the same person he saw when we worked out. That's when we stepped in church. I laughed, I go, but I kept it, as the young folks say, I kept it 100 with him. And then slowly but surely, he started asking the questions to where not only did he not want to go back there with his brother to fight no more, he ended up joining the Marine.
Nice. Leading by example is truly the way to bring people in because it's hard to hear that do as I say, not as I do. That was what we were raised with. No, I'm not saying that's wrong because we turned out just fine. I'm just saying it's so much nicer to see when a person is saying something and they're doing the same thing. Now, on the flip side of that, have you ever mentored someone that you lost, either to gang violence or they just went the wrong way altogether? They just couldn't, get their thoughts together.
They could get them together, but I think sometimes, and this is why I have to take ownership, I think sometimes we give up, and I'll just put it on myself. We
Mhm.
give up on the young person too fast, because where there were signs to like, yo, tighten it up a little bit. I got softer and softer. It's like, hey, look, he ain't listening, so I'm gonna keep it moving. So yeah, I did have instances of stuff like that, but that's why I learned myself too. One, you can't save everybody.
Mhm.
But two, there are some people that, yo, you can't just give up on too fast. And that's why you have to, as a young man, I have to be prayerful about God. How would you have me to go about it? Should I loosen up a little bit or should I tighten up? Because the thing is, it's never about me. It's about the young man. Like you said, because you never want somebody to go to jail. You never want somebody to lose their life. So for me, if I have the chance to speak to them or help them, like, yo, that's my goal.
Okay.
It's
And
safe space.
and with you doing this on your own, and you said there are other people and there's a group of you that's creating this safe space. Is this a nonprofit organization? Is it a podcast? Is it a group? What exactly is
Going to be a mixture. It's going to be a nonprofit. It's going to be a group. But the thing is, it won't just be myself. Like I said, it'll be two other young men that will be doing this with the podcast. But I don't want people to stick to, hey, it'll just be a podcast because the goal is to have the resources for somebody to call and just want to talk about everyday life to say, yo, I don't know how to get a job. I don't know how to have, like, I found that certain young men don't even know how to do an interview, and it's no slight against them. They just never been given that tool or that resource to do that. So it's little stuff like that. Or I found that a lot of times people, and I'll just stick with young men, want answers to things. And a lot of times it's writing the book that they don't pick up. But the thing is, how do you advise them to pick up a book? How do you advise them to look at a podcast? How do you advise them to look at something longer than 5 to 10 minutes without trying to shun or beat them down? Because the thing is, like you said, we wasn't beat down, we wasn't cussed out, we wasn't made to feel less than because somebody did it for us. I was blessed to have grandparents that made sure, regardless to what I had, what I needed. So for me, I think that's the aspect of answering your question. The podcast, the nonprofit. but also just making sure these young men have the resources that they need, regardless of what. But the biggest concept is the safe space so they can feel safe enough to like, yo, I really don't know how to talk to a young man across the table from me about getting a job. I really don't know how to change a tire. I really don't know how I'm supposed to balance an account. If I'm actually supposed to have $25 at least in my don't touch account. Matter of fact, what is a don't touch account? So it's just little stuff like that that a lot of times we try to be so formal with it when all it takes is just sitting down at a lunch table, whatever the case may be, and just having that conversation.
Okay, so it sounds like you'll be giving, instruction, showing them things that they might not necessarily know about and are embarrassed to ask about. You're also going to have episodes that focus on mentoring where people are telling their stories and how they made it over, or are you going to give them the opportunity to come on your podcast and talk about, their mentoring experiences? Because I'm curious of how the podcast is going to be built. What's the premise? I mean, I know that you're
It'll
in the
be a
stages
mixture
of
of
building
both.
it.
And then
Mm-hmm.
that's why I said I don't want to hold it down to just a podcast because
Right.
some young men will want to share their story. But
Mm-hmm.
some young men, as you know, with me, don't want to share their story because they want to keep it close to the vest.
Mm-hmm.
For those that need it, they'll share it. But they have the opportunity outside of the podcast to share it. The goal is to have a mixture of everything, tangible, touchable evidence from people that want to share, but also like a setup to where if they need to reach out to somebody they can relate to from one of the podcasts, I their information is right there.
Okay. Because as you were talking, I kept hearing conference, conference, conference in my mind, in my
Comfort.
thoughts. Conference. Like a men's conference, but a young man's conference, a safe space conference. Do you have any thoughts of doing anything like that?
And that's why I chuckle, because one of the young men, I call him young, but I call him my big brother in the faith. He's in Mobile.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I went to a conference with him less than a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And, and we were talking, and I was at the conference, and it was for all ages.
Mm-hmm.
And when we finished, all the men from that particular church were like, hey, he's like, tell me what y'all learned, tell me what y'all gleaned from it. And at the end, I said, I noticed this was not geared towards young men.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. I think sometimes it's okay to have a conference. I'm all for it. But you got to first build up to it because you can have a conference and not tailor it to the audience that you have, meaning the young men. So for me, I would love to just have something informal before the conference. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not against a conference, but I would love to get their thoughts, their feedback on, okay, what are you looking for in the conference? How, and then just going from there. Because we did talk about that less than a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have a conference which my cousin is running, but it's for young ladies. It's called Help Her Heal in
Mm-hmm.
Mobile, Alabama. And then her touched on that last year because I was on the panel, and that's what I touched on. There's a lot to help her heal,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not a lot to help him heal.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Especially younger and older men, because the thing is, you should have known better. You call yourself a man of God. I
Mm-hmm.
can't believe you did that as a young man following Christ. Well, he's human too. He has that flesh that he can't shake until it says ash to ash, dust to dust. So therefore, like I said, hence the word safe space. So they don't feel embarrassed when they come to that conference. They don't feel embarrassed when they sit in front of a group of young men. And sometimes I find it when men are around other men, they feel free to
Mm-hmm.
just. So now they can get what you just brought up. They can get that answer because sometimes the answer is within that circle.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And doing this. Just hearing you talk about it, this sounds like this is your purpose, your life's work. And in doing these things, were you able to heal the young man in you? Because you started off saying that, this was something that would have done you, well as a young man, growing up. But you had, awesome grandparents, that showed you lots of things. But even in that, having a mentor, having someone that truly understood you in a safe space would have or could have changed different things in your life? I'm not sure. I can't say that. But what I'm
I,
saying
I
is,
know
did
exactly
it
what you're
heal?
saying, and hence safe space.
Mm-hmm.
The reason is because of that, because that is the case. There were some things my grandparents were up in age, so they couldn't necessarily show me. They gave me the resources and people around me to help, but there were a lot of things that I guessed on.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, had I had that safe space earlier on to say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Hey, this is what's going on. Even had that circle of trust to say, hey, man, I'm thinking about making this decision. I'm thinking, and here's the thing, like, I'll keep it simple. Um, my first big paycheck, I'm thinking about getting rims versus literally just paying the car off. Something as simple as that, like you said, would have kept me from guessing, not realizing I don't need a set of rims. Pay
Mm-hmm.
the car off and keep it moving.
Mm-hmm.
Thing is, those are the questions that I was unable to ask in a circle of men that had gone before me and said, "Hey, now fast forward is this little stuff like that I can have those conversations with." Like the biggest thing that I talked about at the beginning was a don't touch account. That means as a young man, you should have some type of fund set aside to rent for a rainy day, or if you just want to go on a vacation. But
Mm-hmm.
how many young men even know where to start?
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, it's just little stuff like that.
So with that though, now that you've created this safe space, has it healed the young man in you?
I'm not, I've healed, but it's just like with anybody, and I can only speak for myself. There are certain days, remember my oldest brother, we talk about there are certain days where certain conversations that'll come up and it reminds me of certain things they've healed, but they still pop up.
Okay. And does this feel like you found the purpose that God has placed for your life?
Yes,
You know how
yes.
people search all their life trying to figure out what it is that God wants them to do? How do you know, or what makes you feel that this is it?
Because I didn't have to necessarily search.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at peace with knowing just some of the things that I've seen just by doing I won't say the bare minimum. I feel like I'm just doing what people did for me, but
Mm-hmm.
just hearing some of the good and the bad that comes from young men fulfilling their dreams, becoming lawyers, becoming doctors, just becoming stable young men, and taking care of their home because people think you need a title to be a godly or good young man. No, just being a stable, steady, consistent young man. For me, just seeing that. Something as simple as watching a young man that didn't know how to cut his own yard.
Yeah.
Not only get up and cut his own yard, but help other people cut their own yard. Get up, wash their car, just little stuff like that. So just watching that and realizing like, yo, these young men are not lost. They just need help. They're screaming, they're crying out for help. But it's like the picture you see. A lot of times they're screaming, but they're screaming like this because they're too afraid of people gossiping or trying to make them feel less than for asking instead of just saying, bruh, I don't know the answer myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what's the main thing that is requested the most of you, or the question that's asked the most of you as a mentor?
That's just it. For me, when I observe, it's not so much as asked of me, it's
Hmm.
observed first of me.
Okay.
Am I the young man I'm proclaiming to be? And
Hmm.
once they see they can trust me, once they see they have a safe space, then they
Hmm.
open up to say, hey, how? The biggest thing is how. It's
Hmm.
no longer why, it's how do. What do you think?
Okay.
Those are the two. How and what do you think?
So
And
what thing are they asking? How? How do I?
how do I go about life? Am I doing life right?
Okay. Okay.
And,
I got you.
and that's why I brought up the foundation of finding a church that has a small groups with a men's group built in it. Um, because I think a lot of times we overlook where the root starts at. If they have that foundation that's being taught right, like it carries them a long way. I'm proof of that.
Mhm. And a lot of people, don't know you, but I'm sure that after they see this podcast, they'll know a little bit more about you. But you have taught Bible study before and you have ministered to people before. Have you ever considered doing like a virtual Bible study or some type of ministry meeting for these young men just so they can hear the word?
I have. I consider. I've also taught. I had the privilege of teaching at a prison in New Jersey as well.
Mhm.
Um, so for me, I trust me, I don't mind doing. I thought about doing that, and the two young men that will be in the group with me on podcast. That's literally one of the goals is to give that foundation so they can ask the questions and we're related to the word, we're related to the study Bible, and just try to break it down. But the thing is, don't have a problem with it.
Okay, so what advice would you give a young man that's watching this right now, or the parents of a young man who they find has a hard time opening up to them? What would you tell them to do to get him to start to talk, to start to speak? Mhm.
Just going back to what I just stated a few minutes ago, finding out his why, but also finding out who he relates to. Because a lot of times, as parents, or just like in my case, I don't have kids. But as an uncle or aunt, you want the best for your niece or your nephew. But sometimes just being in that space and allowing them to talk to you. But also, if it's not the case with you, that's somebody in that circle that they trust. Allow them to open up to them. And the thing is, like we used to say, don't invade their privacy, but no, find out what's going on. They'll open up to you sooner or later.
All right. And what would you like to say to the young men that's out there listening when it comes to finding their safe space?
Find your safe space sooner than later because you asked the question earlier, what are some things do I feel like some things would have changed, some things would have adjusted had I found that mentor, that safe space, et cetera, et cetera?
Mhm.
Yes. Because the 15-year-old teenager will grow up to be the 25-year-old teenager that is still searching for a safe space. Find it sooner than later. There is no shame as a young man saying, I need help. That's why I mentioned who is your, what church do you attend? What small group do they have? Is it a group of men that you can literally go talk to? And as you go to the church, observe. Don't just go because you hear me or hear you talking. Well, they say I need to go. No. Observe the person's tendencies. Do they talk about the word of God? Do they live the word of God? So now does that, here's the other piece. Does that person conversation vibe with the way you carry yourself? Now that makes them approachable. So go ahead and approachable with your questions.
Mhm.
And then you go from there. But again, don't wait. Go ahead and find your safe space sooner than later. That's me.
Okay. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the guests out there that's watching Embracing the Fight, episode 125, Safe Space?
That's just it. Safe space is what it is. Nothing crazy about it. Just keeping it simple. I'm just allowing young, because I know we talk mostly about young men,
Mhm.
but I'm almost 44. There's some seasoned men, as we like to say, because we don't like to say old men or mature men, that need to hear that conversation as well. So it's not just for young men, it's for the seasoned young men with the grays and touch ups and the spray paint and all that. But it is what it is. So for me, like, hey, the more the merrier.
You just made me think about something. It's millions of baby boomers out there that know how to do things that probably would love, to be mentored. But they were part of like the silent generation and the baby boomers, and they didn't like share a whole lot of things. They just know that they had to work and they were expected to do certain things. And since they're that way, imagine what it would be like if you could bring those two generations together. Because the silent generation and baby boomers have a lot to teach the younger generation, as a younger generation would have a lot to teach the silent generation and the boomers. So have you ever considered, doing a mashup like that?
It's, thing is, you got to get them in the room because the thing is, it's like that's what I talked about the conference. It's like having a conference with those two, but just separated because one side of the team, well, one side of the conference wants to hear about baby booming ideas, electronics, stock, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
Versus the old school side of the house, they don't want to hear all that. They literally want to hear what they need to hear and get on up out of there. So you got to find a middle ground. And
Mm-hmm.
literally, I think one of the best conferences I went to where they had an electronic screen up there and they were asking specific certain questions so that the group, it was 100,000 of us in Lithonia, Georgia. And they
Mm-hmm.
were just asking us simple questions. And in about 30 minutes, they broke us up into small groups and they allowed us to talk within those small groups.
Hmm.
So,
Nice. See, I would be interested to help with something like that, but I just happen to be a woman and I don't know if you would let me help you build it. But I would love to help and build something like that because it sounds like fun. It sounds like something really interesting. And like I said, my dad is a part of the silent generation, and he has friends, and they probably would enjoy showing young men how to garden, how to change tires, how to paint, how to do, the roof, gutters, all that, just to teach them those sorts of things. But then they turn around and say, hey, show me how to use this phone. Show me how to use this computer.
tell me
You
how I can
know,
make my life a lot easier because the thing is, you
right.
also flip it and tie it. Hey, show me the easier way so I can use my tablet to order the planting seeds that I need to go in this garden. Where can I get? Where? How fast can I talk to my iPad to have my list ready to go the next morning? Just
Mhm.
little stuff like that is how we tie it in. And that's what I said. Sometimes we try to make it too formal, but these conversations need to happen because instead of that young man pulling a gun out at the gas station because he got somebody bumped into him, now he could literally be somewhere gardening because I guarantee you by the time you finish working, you're too tired. You don't want to argue about it. You just want to go home, go to sleep, take a shower. Matter of fact, I'm a fat kid, so I just want to eat, take a shower, and go to sleep.
I think that's the truth because gardening is not for the weak. I tell you, it is not.
Especially if they're doing the old school way, you manually peeling up weeds and all. But I leave that alone because my granddad had me done.
My
I don't
daughter
need no,
still does that now.
I don't
Right
need no
now.
lawnmower. I got you. So okay, flashback. Sorry, no more. Okay, okay.
That's funny. So, with that being said, is there anyone that you want to mention or shout out or say hi to or anything like that before we close? No? Well, you have been an awesome guest, and I just want to thank you for coming on to Embracing the Fight and sharing as much as you share concerning a safe place. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right. And to our guests, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode 125, Safe Space. And if you take heed to the words that Leviticus shared with you, maybe you too can be a mentor and a safe space to someone. And if you are looking for a mentor, just know there's someone that's out there looking for you as well. And as always, I want you to have an absolutely amazing day.